And these are obviously not construction drawings, just very preliminary pictures to get at vicinity. So rerouting one line, that's the long line you see from Soundview to Redondo Beach. And then also just clearing up more of a direct path for that to the northeast there on Soundview for the water to reach the sound, so it doesn't have to take a right turn there and sort of reduce backflow of that. So the engineer's estimate for this one was $223K. The construction cost came in at 192. So again, we're under roughly 30K under on this one. And then you can go down one more, Jody, for me. And then after that, we'll switch back. If you could just scroll down one more page, Jody. I don't know if it's updating on our end.
Hey, Tyler, I don't think there is another one that I can see.
One more page. It looks like the scroll bar on the right can go down. No?
Can it?
You see that over on the right? I don't know.
Odd.
There is page. It says, there you go.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
I was starting to second guess what I sent you there, but I'm glad that worked. So yeah, this last one here is 8th Avenue South between 264th Street and 265th 65th Street. Essentially, we wanted to pick up drainage that was sheet flowing off to the west off of 8th Avenue South, as below in that wooded area is a landslide hazard, erosion hazard area. So just reducing the water impacting the slope there. Excuse me.
Can you scroll down a little bit more? There you go.
And Tyler, could you also mention there's an interlocal agreement that's also one of the motions next week related to this project as well. Can you kind of briefly give a description about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So last, I believe in November, we had an ILA approved through council for Lake Haven Utility District to jump onto this portion, or I should say this CIP project, 8th Avenue South. And they're essentially going to be replacing their water line on the east. Essentially, you know, you see this black line there, that's not their water line, or yeah, that's not their water line, but essentially along that black line there on the east side of the street, they're going to replace their side connections and their main line in addition to this project. So that ILA helps us reduce costs with splitting pavement restoration, with splitting mobilization and traffic control. So when we jump back to the bid summary, I'll explain that's Schedule D is their portion of the work, when you see the cost that came in for the construction. So that's good for us, Jody. We can go back to the other PDF.
So Tyler?
Yes.
So the road, once it's all done, will be entirely repaved.
Yes, you're making me want to confirm that. But I believe it is a full overlay restoration.
The consultant said so, so yeah.
Thank you, Austin. Yeah.
And what's underneath it will also have been replaced.
Correct.
Exactly, yeah.
Correct.
One and done. Love it.
Yep. So yeah, Jody, if you could switch back to the attachment here for the Environment Committee. And it just, now I'll go into the breakdown of the costs and the different bids we received. I'm really testing our IT Zoom skills here.
This is also page 4 of the agenda packet.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
So while that's going, you go ahead, Tyler.
Sure. Okay.
We'll see
Yeah. To save some time here. So, yeah. So the total overall cost, city cost for those 3 CIP projects is roughly 680,000. The Lake Haven work is roughly 600 alone. So almost equivalent there. They are almost half the cost in this. I should say that the Lake Haven work will be part of the, essentially the city will be reimbursed. This will be added as a budget amendment to the 8th Avenue CIP to include the full cost of their work, and throughout the construction will be reimbursed for their portion. So the true city cost there is the $680K roughly between the 3 projects. We do not require a budget amendment for those 3 projects, as the current budget sheets were well under those allotted amounts, including contingencies. We also have, we'll have 3 motions in addition for construction management. This is going to be through parametrics to help us out on these 3 projects. They're 3 different motions because we're leaving these as individual CIPs, even though the construction contract is for all of them. Just stay consistent. We did each of them separate in design and decided later that we would combine them. So it's just to stay true with our budgeting and our tracking with finance to keep them separated. We'll also have a minor ILA amendment come to council next week for the Lake Haven ILA, and it's a very minor change reflecting their construction management costs more accurately, and just tailoring that once they receive the true estimate from parametrics, we needed to adjust that. So that's in there as well. Yeah, so of the 6 bids we received, RW Scott Construction was the lowest. We had 1 other bid under the engineer's estimate, but the engineer's estimate is kind of right where we want to see it, right in the middle. We had 4 other bids come in above the engineer's estimate. So we're real happy with these numbers. We're real excited to start this one. Assuming we get approvals next week, we'll be off with a pre-construction meeting soon after that. Happy to answer questions on this.
I'm not seeing any hands at this time, but
Yes, Mayor.
okay.
Yeah.
Councilmember Harris, go ahead.
All right. So these are, just my noob kinds of things. In the 8th Avenue, 264th, where, we're partnering with the Water District, is it just an engineering thing? Is it always the case that you put the drain on one side and the water supply on the other side?
No,
Or is
that's
that just how it turned out to work?
yeah, that's not always the case. With stormwater, where we kind of try to be on the down gradient, and I'm not sure on Lake Haven's approach to where they want their water line to run. Maybe Brandon has more information about kind of the standard for water lines.
Councilmember Harris, as a general policy, we try to keep the water and sewers within 5 feet of the center line of most roadways, right-of-ways, with a 10-foot separation between. So usually one of them is on one side of the center line, one of the sewers on the other side. But sometimes, whether it be historical or geography dictates where they may have been able to put the water or sewer line. So I would say generally they're towards the middle, but that's not always the case. And I don't know all the reasons why it's not the case here, but that's a good question.
So typically in these kinds of partnerships, you're going to redo the entire road. Basically, you're going to resurface the whole thing.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So the other stupid question is, I'm coming from the private world. How do you basically, propose a certain base amount that you think the job should cost, and then these people come in and they bid? How does that work? I mean, is there it's just, again, it's probably a stupid question, but, I'm not used to basically telegraphing, here's how much of the job should cost ahead of time. So is there some standard?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think it's telegraphing. We have history with bid openings where bids their contractors give prices on bid items, and those are standard throughout the industry. And so the consultants and the city keep sort of a log of what's sort of a typical price per unit on that bid item. And so when we advertise a project, we will say, for example, an engineer's estimate is in this general range, and we'll not show our hand, so to speak. And But at the end of the day, all of these companies have, usually full-time estimators that's their life, is going and bidding projects and estimating. So we could say the project was 400,000, and that's really not reality. We just kind of help give them a guide. Many companies want to know if it's a $10 million project or $1 million project, and then they'll go chase it, for example, depending on the type of project. So that's why the engineer's estimate is helpful. It also is helpful for us to see, are these bids coming back to what maybe historically the trends have been for unit prices, so that we can decide, well, these bids are way out of line and way over. And when it's over 10%, when we miss it that much, then it causes us to dig a little deeper as to why and what's going on. So it's helpful to track and gauge, did we get a good number based on what we expect.
Okay, so you've got what my business used to call a Chinese menu. You've got basically a purchase history with, acceptable amounts for, certain commodity components, and based on what the city's paid 20 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever, and that's how you pull those numbers together. Am I sort of getting that right?
I would just say it's a history of bid items.
Mhm.
And that then, based on the quantity, helps us kind of, what is asphalt, what is 12-foot diameter pipe going for? Those are how the bid items are broken down. And so we just have good historical numbers based on previous projects.
Yeah, and our consultants help with that too, because they work on dozens of other projects around the region and open lots more bids than we do. And so they have their finger on the pulse of what's happening in the market.
And that's parametrics in this case?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Does that cover the project update? So then I'd like us, if so, it looks like I'd like to move us forward to the surface water comprehensive plan update.
We have Austin Fisher with Parametrics and Matt Hobson with FCS Group to do the briefing. The last time we've brought this item up to the committee was last November, so it's been a few months. I think in their presentation, they have a summary of what was the comments that was raised earlier. You want to go ahead, Austin?
Sure, and am I able to share my screen?
I believe so.
Yes, you are. There you go.
So
You're
everybody can see the
sharing.
presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Austin Fisher with Parametrics, and Matt Hobson will jump in here toward the tail end of the presentation and go over the update to the financial plan. First off, we'll just give a quick overview or recap of kind of what we've done since we last met. A couple of the comments from last time, we talked about looking at a transfer of capital to help alleviate some of the emergency hits when emergency projects come up and it delays the capital, which is center of our conversation today, looking at that capital improvement plan. We also noted last time that we were going to wait to see these the three projects you just talked about, see how those bids came in, see if there's any impacts from the pandemic. There's been material supply and procurement issues and things that affected various projects. And as you saw, the bids came in really well, actually. I think our estimates were pretty comfortable with the estimates that we have now. And so that's some of the feedback we had last time. And so let's get going here. We got some of the things that we did right after the last meeting. The team got together and we reviewed the MPDES stormwater permit requirements against the city's existing program. And we highlighted some key action and some items for this plan update. So that'll be coming down the road. You'll see that information with the plan update. We also summarized the stormwater planning efforts during the last permit cycle for the city's annual report to ecology. So that's more recently we completed that work. And then most recently, we evaluated the capital projects in the plan. We confirmed those estimates based on the 3 recent CIPs. We created a 9-year CIP. Last time we talked about how under the current rate strategy, we wouldn't be able to complete all of the work that was included in the initial plan. So we created a 9-year CIP, and that allowed us to identify which specific projects we pushed to the out years in 2027, 28, and 29. And then we also looked at the financial impacts that Matt will talk about of adding an annual $100,000 transfer to capital. That additional funding would provide some funding for emergencies or maybe some opportunity-based projects that come along that could be done without further pushing out the planned capital projects. Switch the slide here real quick. So like we said, to preserve the current rate structure, we would need to push 4 projects out to the out years in 27 through 29. And this is a list of the CIP. So the projects that are above the line here, those are the projects that we would get done by 2026. The projects that we push to those out years of 27, 28, and 29 are below the line. So there's 4 projects, and I'll get into those in just a second and just quickly describe what those projects are for you. One thing to note is that we did add 2 projects here that are part of the RIA 9, that's the Water Resource Inventory Area 9, which is where you're at. Those 2 projects are for Massey Creek and for Des Moines Creek. There's some funding that goes on with those, and if you want to talk about that a little more, I think Lauren could give you an update. So we included those 2 projects. That won't have an impact on the timing, but we wanted to make sure we had as most relevant information as we could for you here today.
Austin, just really quick, sorry to interrupt. That Massey Creek estuary, that's right at the mouth where it dumps into the sound?
I believe so. Is that correct, Lauren?
Yeah, it's right at the mouth. It's at that, there's a culvert there to replace. We talked about that with maybe making that area as a open space.
So just really briefly while you're on it, we'll get into this later, but committee members, we just got word today that one of those properties has been listed. And so we're seeking ways that we can do perhaps purchase that. We got to act fast on that. So anyway, we'll follow up with you soon on that. Sorry to interrupt, Austin.
No worries. I think. So let's look at these projects that we pushed out. So there's 4 of them. I got some notes down here on each one. I have some detailed sheets if you want to look at them that follow this. The 5th Avenue, 212th Street pipe upgrade project. That one replaces 2,600 feet of corrugated metal pipe with both 12-inch and 18-inch pipe. The other one sees the service center material storage improvements. That constructs some covered storage bins. Certain materials you need to cover so it doesn't get rained on and then create polluted water. The Kent Des Moines 16th Avenue B pipe replacement. That would install 1,200 feet of new 12-inch pipe and 6 catch basins on 16th, and then it would replace the roadside ditch on the north side of Kent Des Moines Road with 900 feet of 36-inch pipe and 9 storm drain manholes. And then finally, the 232nd Street project from 10th to 14th. That would install about 2,200 feet of storm pipe on the north side of 232nd. So those are the projects that are pushed into the out years.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
On the service center material storage improvements, correct me if I'm wrong, did we not talk about this for several years, especially considering it needed to be covered because it could cause some environmental issues? Am I thinking about the wrong thing? And I think Dan, you were in most of those municipal facility committee meetings.
Yeah, we've been talking about these improvements for a while. And so we do have to make these at some point soon, based on our commitments with the Department of Ecology. So
we're okay to push it out that far then with ecology?
Yeah, this is Tyler. We did have some flexibility with ecology. They wanted to see that we were making steps to do these improvements, and by putting them into a CIP, that showed that we were taking these improvements seriously. And with as far as target dates, there was a general consensus of flexibility in those commitments. There wasn't any hard and fast deadlines by ecology.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions on the projects?
Yeah, thank, thank you, Mayor. So, and I'm sorry, again, these will be real broad. So how do our rates compare to other cities? Is there some analysis that is done, on that kind of stuff? Are we, are people underpaying, overpaying relative to Federal Way or Burien or what have you? Yeah.
I believe, Matt, do we have that slide in the slide deck? In your presentation? I believe we do. If I can bring it up. We had that in our last slide deck. Let me see.
Sorry, I was pulling up sorry, Austin. I was pulling up the presentation and all of my windows in my screen went berserk there. So,
No.
so we did do a survey back in our November discussion.
Yeah.
And your current rates really put you right in the middle. So in terms of who are your comparables directly around you, the city of Kirkland is just slightly below Des Moines, and then King County's unincorporated rates are slightly higher. Generally, though, you're kind of in the middle of the cities in the area.
Okay, so I guess, yeah, this is just the, are you, this is probably in there also. Are there any end of life issues? Are there any of these projects that simply cannot wait 5 years due to capacity or, corrosion, what have you? I'm just, this is such an unsexy thing. I have people tell me all the time, well, if it gets more expensive in Des Moines, I'm going to move to Federal Way, or, some nonsense like that. They just, it's just an interesting thing to get people to pay for stuff they need, but it's not like fixing a pothole.
Councilmember Harris, if I could, I'd like to keep going through this presentation, but the one thing about the Surface Water Management Fund is it's an enterprise fund. And the rates, we always like being in the middle of the pack and so forth, but the rates are based on what our surface water management needs are and the number of people paying into it, because an enterprise fund has to cover its costs. And, it's unfortunately, it's kind of what it is, because the alternative to not having a surface water management plan, well, it is not good, but one of the things that citizens definitely will see is the resulting flooding and other problems that come with not having that, along with the pollution that gets in the sound, et cetera. So I don't really want to take a deep dive on our rates at this time, but I think it's important to understand that we have so many households and so many things paying into the system. The system has to pay for what it needs to do. And that's the challenge.
It's a fair point, but really the question, the zillion-dollar question is, how aggressively do you want to keep up with the projects that need doing, and how many, in order to basically make it less painful for property owners. So,
well, I do think that comes down to a council decision when the staff asks us to pass various things, but at the same time, when the money's available is when you have to take care of what's going on. When the money, because there are times economically where the money isn't available, and then we have issues, and it's just part of the challenge. But I'd like to continue forward if we could.
Okay, so that's it on the capital improvement plan, and now I'll hand it over to Matt, and he can go over the changes that we've made then to the financial plan.
Great. Okay. So just as a quick recap, we presented an initial plan to the committee back in November. And so what we've done since then is work with city staff and parametrics to revise that original plan based on this extended capital project schedule, and then also analyzing the financial and the rate impacts from establishing a capital contingency reserve that would be used for those projects that are unanticipated right now that you would likely face something in the future. So the graph on this slide compares the revenues against forecasted expenses if the capital plan were extended through 2029. The black line on the graph represents the revenues, and it's important to remember that these revenues include the provision from Ordinance 1620, which allows the city to automatically adjust stormwater rates by consumer price index and a measure of construction cost index as a way to making sure that rates automatically keep up with inflation. And that's why that black line grows each year over time. The dark gray bar is our projection of operating expenses growing by presumed levels of inflation. And then the utility has a goal to commit 30% of annual revenue to something called system reinvestment, and that's illustrated in that tan bar. System reinvestment is a best practice in utility fund management, where you annually are setting aside revenue to support asset replacement and capital projects, as opposed to relying exclusively on debt, or if you are lucky enough, grant funding. Based on our projection, the city can fund the revised capital project schedule, as well as its operating expenses with its existing rates, as well as those annual automatic inflationary adjustments. Next slide, Austin. So we also do not anticipate any additional rate action needed if the city were to also begin setting aside the $100,000 each year to a capital contingency fund. And the reason behind that is the city today maintains a healthy financial reserve of about $3 million, which is equivalent to about 300 days of operating expenses. The capital contingency transfer is essentially moving one part of the fund balance to and earmarking it for this capital contingency. And so looking forward, we don't anticipate any rate action needed to establish this capital contingency reserve. Looking forward, we would estimate that the overall fund balance for the stormwater fund over the next several years would range between $2 and $3.5 million. That's the amount of money you would have in your fund balance over the next several years, the minimum amount. Okay, next slide, please. So as a third alternative, we also looked at going back to the original capital plan schedule. So executing all the capital projects as identified by 2026, as well as setting aside that $100,000 each year for a capital contingency reserve. So by condensing the capital projects and trying to set aside $100,000 each year for this contingency fund, it does generate some rate pressure. And we would anticipate and project annual 5% rate adjustments through 2026. And those 5% rate adjustments would be in addition to those automatic annual inflationary adjustments that are already approved by the city. Next slide, please. So under this third option, condensing the capital project schedule through 2026, those 5% rate adjustments, just as a reminder, would be in addition to the automatic inflationary adjustments. And what that would mean is that a typical stormwater monthly rate would increase by about $1.03 to $2 each year through 2026. Next slide. But as a recap, though, if you were to extend the capital plan through 2029, you could fund all of the operating and capital obligations, as well as setting aside that contingency capital reserve under existing rates, along with those inflationary adjustments. On the flip side, should the city instead choose to implement the original schedule, as a recap, we would anticipate those additional 5% annual rate adjustments to existing rates. The table below kind of showcases the first kind of light gray shows what the rate projections would be for under extending just the capital plan through 2029. And then the schedule below that shows what the rate adjustment would be if you were to go back and instead condense the capital project schedule to have it completed by 2026. So that's kind of our revised financial analysis and plan for the revised capital plan, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I've got, I see Councilmember Banks. I'll start with her.
So this is kind of a crazy question, maybe, with the perhaps infrastructure bill that's being proposed, the $2 trillion is if we were to get that money, would that help in this instance so that we're not increasing rates by that 5%?
Well, I guess assuming that the funding is available and that projects the city has in its plan would qualify for the funding, then it would likely reduce some of that pressure, I would estimate.
Reduce it or eliminate it?
It will depend on how much funding the city would qualify for. So I don't know.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Before I go to Councilmember Harris, one of the things I want to keep things in the context of is that having been here when the city's finances were not in the kind of condition they are, I know that there was a lot of infrastructure that was not dealt with or deferred. And so the question is, you talk about compressing the capital plan from 2021 to 2026. And to do that, it would require an additional 5%. But my concern is, can we go till 2029? I'm not sure about the condition of things. And I'd like to be really clear of the impact if we don't compress or if we make the decision and make the decision to go to 2029.
I think that's a good question. Lauren, Austin, my thinking is that we wouldn't propose, stretching the infrastructure improvements out 3 years if we felt like we had some impending critical failures. But I'd like to hear your thoughts as well.
For the 4 projects that we had, I didn't see anything in there that was of super concern. I mean, they are high priority projects that was in our original list that we want to get done with this plan. But they were, even with the original plan, at the tail end of that 10-year period. But no, I don't think we have something there that would really give me a lot of concern to move them out a couple of years like we have.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree. I am vaguely paranoid about climate change and so on, and my nature would be to be more aggressive with getting these things done. I guess so. My question is there? So we're talking about basically taking $100,000 a year from the general fund, and that's going to become like a regular thing from now on. I mean, basically forever. That's the anticipation.
The transfer to this established capital contingency fund would not be coming from the general fund. It would be transferring from the operating fund of the stormwater fund.
Pardon me. Yeah. But that's going to be, I misspoke, but that's going to be stable. That you anticipate that won't increase like on a percentage basis over time. That's a fixed dollar.
Yeah, the financial plan that we set up that you see here on the slide assumes a fixed $100,000 transfer each year beginning in 2022.
I mean, and for like 10 years, 5 years? I mean, is it foreseeable like that, or?
So the schedule on the presentation now assumes that each year in that schedule, so from 2022 through 2029, that there's an additional $100,000 being transferred to the contingency fund. So
Okay, I'm sorry.
$500,000 by 2026.
I know I'm being redundant, but is there any city that has a model that is somehow value or income based for any of this stuff? Where essentially, because 5%, $7 to somebody who makes $50,000 a year is more than it is to somebody who makes $200,000 a year. So I'm just wondering if there's any way that we can factor that into this model, or is that just unheard of?
Generally, for utility rates like stormwater, state law places some parameters that the rate you charge have to be somewhat commensurate with the cost to provide that service, as opposed to other measures, an example, income. And so the rates established by the city are generally based on impervious square feet as a measure of the cost to provide that service.
But having said that, the impervious square feet, if someone made $200,000, chances are they would buy a bigger home with more impervious square footage, and they would pay more. So from that standpoint, the only caveat to what you're suggesting is if somebody made that larger end of your income and chose to live in a 900 square foot home.
Well, I mean, we do have a number of people who are, incomes are not, I don't think incomes directly correlate with, square footage. But I'm not trying to make it by income per se, but just some other flexibility so that people who can afford to pay more could share more, more of the stuff, the payments. And you're saying that's not possible under state law.
I guess our recommendation would be there definitely is flexibility around just a strict impervious surface area, but the nexus is that whatever rate structure adopted should generally reflect the cost to provide that service. So we can provide some additional insights, I guess, after this meeting in terms of alternative rate structures that the city that are being used by other cities.
The challenge that the administration of something like this would be very challenging, because I mean, we can't even, we struggle with finding modified rates for our after school programs and things like that, or any of our Parks and Recs programs, and people can file for grants and so forth, but it doesn't work out very well. And I think from a utility standpoint, Councilmember Harris, that would be a complication that would cost us as much to administer or more than sticking with the
No, I'm not suggesting income based. I'm just suggesting, like, just because maybe there's some creative solution that other cities have come up with to spread the pain a bit. It's regressive, this system, to a certain extent, the way we people pay for utilities. It's just harder in people with lower incomes. It's just a fact. Anyway, I'm done.
Okay, I believe that brings us to the end of our comprehensive plan. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. Am I correct? Brandon?
Well, maybe Lauren, we could just, next steps for the comprehensive plan update. What do you see?
Well, Austin, do you think we'll have a draft plan put together? We've got a September scheduled for the September meeting of bringing the draft plan. Do you think that's doable?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll bring a draft plan to the committee then in September, and then if everything checks out, looks good, we'll take it right to council immediately.
So yeah, we'll be bringing some recommendations on the rates to the committee first in that September meeting, and then with direction and concurrence, move to the full council. Dan, did you want to add anything or?
Yeah, I need to chat with you and Lauren on the schedule. I just want to make sure that we coordinate well. We have a number of master plan type things coming forward to council this fall, the marina, the swim master plan, and the parks master plan. So we need to make sure we coordinate that on the agenda well, so we don't
We're gonna do them all in one night, right?
So what I will say is at this point, updated recommendations on rates and the plan will come forward at some point this fall.
That's fair.
The swim comp plan's a little sensitive in that if the choice is to raise the rates, we would need to get a ordinance put together and adopted before December 1st, so that would be made effective for next year.
Understand. I will leave that to our chief operating officer to work out the schedule on that based on your input. Okay, that takes us to the end of our agenda. And we have a council meeting in about 15 minutes. So with that,
Move to adjourn.
motion to adjourn. I'll second. All those in favor, hands up. Okay, we are adjourned. We'll see you at the council meeting. Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
work, team.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.